1 in 5 children starting primary school this year in England will do so without full protection against serious preventable diseases because not a single childhood vaccine met its uptake target last year.
So the target for all childhood vaccinations is 95%. However, latest figures show a worrying shortfall. Let's have a look at them. Only 88.9% of 5-year-olds received the hib-C vaccine, which protects against Haemophilus influenzae type B and meningitis C.
And just over 83% had both doses of the MMR vaccine, safeguarding against measles, mumps and rubella. That's the lowest level in 15 years.
And nearly 82% were given the 4-in-1 preschool booster, which protects against polio, whooping cough, tetanus and diphtheria, all grim diseases for your youngster to get. Well, joining us now is Emily Pomeroy-Smith, whose 8-year-old son, Logan, has an autoimmune condition, meaning he gets more vaccines than most children, doesn't he? As well as, of course, Dr. Amir to explain it all for us. I mean, vaccines, as a principle, have revolutionised our health generally, haven't they, in the last sort of 50 to 100 years? But it now seems to be there's a lot of fear. How much do you think that's to do with COVID? There's been a lot of information and misinformation surrounding the COVID vaccine, but also some fact that it has affected people. Yeah. So do you think that that's spread it? Before we come to you with your personal experience, Dr. Amir, do you think that's at the core of this?
I think that's a factor in it, because that was such an intense time for so many people, both COVID and the way the vaccine was rolled out. There was a lot of information going on around at the time. I think we've got to be very clear that vaccines do save lives, but these illnesses haven't been seen for so long, and that many people have not seen them themselves, have forgotten how serious things like diphtheria and tetanus and polio can be. And then
perhaps my parents' generation, certainly, even probably yours, knew the horrors because they'd seen others get it.
And when that happens, when people haven't seen these conditions for a long time, the risk perception changes, so they worry more about the vaccine rather than the disease it prevents. And if you couple that with conflicting information online, real fear and mistrust, perhaps bad experiences with the healthcare system, parents have genuine concerns and questions. And I think we have to engage with parents with those questions and concerns and have real conversations. I always find when I'm talking to parents at work, at my surgery, it's not about giving them the facts of this is how the vaccine works. It's understanding where they're coming from, offering reassurance and really just conversating with them is the best approach.
That's a really thoughtful way of approaching it. I've got, friends, very, very smart people who had kids exactly as Kate describes, who during the course of the COVID pandemic started expressing, some might argue, legitimate concerns about the safety of the vaccine. And that's led them down what some may argue is a rabbit hole where they have access to what doctors call misinformation, alongside a real scepticism towards the science and scientists. And that's happened at a time where the WHO suggests that 95% is required for herd immunity. Now, given that's the case, how do you speak to parents who say, hang on a second, there were real problems with the COVID vaccines, one of them at least has been withdrawn, why should I trust these other ones?
Yeah. And again, it's going back to where they're coming from, what their concerns are rooted in. And often, well, most likely it's love for their child. They just want to do what's best for their child and not cause that child any harm. When they're overwhelmed with all this information, and the COVID vaccine, there were some really almost authoritarian conversations around it. Who should have it? If they can't have it, they can't do this and they can't do this. And that isn't the way we've ever approached vaccines. We've never mandated anything, and I don't think we ever should. The conversations are always about getting them to understand what might happen if your child was to get this illness. And that herd immunity, 95%, is so important because when we reach that number, the disease has nowhere to go and things don't spread. That's why it's vital to open conversations.
Just to be clear, these vaccines work. I mean,
absolutely. That's the reason we don't see these illnesses anymore, is because these vaccines work so well. And it's not a case of saying, that's the key message here. But also, we can't just go to parents with, these vaccines work, you must have them.
Two things that I think addresses some of the concerns. One is literally what you said, the herd immunity, because I think when you're a parent and you're aware of the common good, and that's how with the common good, you think, but what if my child is the one in 20 million that has an issue with it? I mean, you've had to face this head on, haven't you, with your little one, because of necessity. Did you have fears and trepidations?
Absolutely. Our experience was something, especially when it came to chickenpox specifically, was something that we were the rarity. So he had shingles when he was 14 months old.
Right.
Very rare.
Which is very unusual.
Funny enough, my son had it at a year-old.
Yeah.
Ended up in Great Ormond.
Exactly.
So
and
I
it's
know what
really
that's like.
scary.
Yeah. Very
and
unusual.
Very, very unusual. And what happened was that we initially took him to the pharmacy and they said, oh, it looks like ringworm, have an antifungal cream.
Exactly
You know,
what we
5
went
days
through.
later, nothing getting better. And so took him finally to the GP, saw a nurse, and she said, has he had chickenpox? And I was like, well, no, not as far as I know. And she said, well, it looks like shingles. I'm going to go get a GP. And GP walks in, takes one look at the rash and says, has he had chickenpox? And we're like, well, no. And said, well, he obviously has, but he's got shingles now.
Maybe you just had one small spot that you didn't notice.
Exactly. So it's possible to have a sort of subclinical chickenpox, which basically means that, you know, he might have had a temperature, might have had a bit of cow poll, been a bit miserable, but he had no visible spots or spots that we didn't notice. And then we thought, great, he's had it, out of the woods. Never going to happen again. Wonderful.
Right.
And then when he was 5, we were in Cornwall on holiday, and suddenly came down with it, and he was covered. He had them in his mouth, he had them all over his groin and his genitalia. You know, he was really, really unwell with it. And he ended up on antibiotics because multiple spots got infected. And I think if he'd asked me when he was little, this is optional, you know, I think I possibly would have gone, well, I had it. It was, you know, I remember it. It doesn't seem like it's a bad thing. It's a relatively routine childhood illness. But having seen my child go through that and knowing that it's preventable, why would I want to, you know, put my child through something that actually is preventable? So in hindsight, I would have taken it. We also now have the issue that he has an autoimmune condition, which means that he does have to have extra vaccines. And I think that we are living in a time, you know, he was very little when COVID happened. Certainly he was young when they first started bringing out the children's version of the COVID vaccine, but he was already at that point, it was recommended that he had it, and we had to make a choice. And it's very easy. If you Google something, you're always going to get the worst stories because people will share a bad review.
Yeah, and you're trying to find out, aren't you, and find your information. You don't want that child to be one. One of the concerns of MMR, I remember when I was making the decision, which we did do to give our children to it, was the fact that they did feel a bit ill in the short term with it. Just explain that. And I think the other concern might be here, that you've already got 3 things that you're giving the child with an MMR, and you're now adding a 4th. And I think that might feel to parents like you're in some way overloading the child.
Yeah, so the vaccine, particularly with the chickenpox vaccine, that's going to be added to the MMR vaccine come January at age 12 and 18 months for children. It's going to be a weakened version of the virus. So it's not a virus that will give the child the illness, but it's the weakened version. We call it attenuated. It will train the immune system to produce antibodies against the virus and memory cells should they ever come back and experience the illness again. So it might give you a slight temperature. That's your immune system responding to that weakened virus. We always say that to parents when we give them vaccines. We often give them a prescription for Calpol alongside the vaccine as well. But it's nothing like any of those illnesses, measles, mumps, rubella, or chickenpox.
And it's safe to have them all at once?
Safe to have them all at once. And remember, we've got to say the chickenpox vaccine, has been given to people in the US, Australia, Germany for many, many years, routinely, and is working well, and they've seen their numbers of chickenpox drop dramatically.